The battlefield was silent, but the silence was not peace. It was heavy, filled with the weight of burned ships and drifting metal. The alien commander stood at the edge of the viewport, his long hands gripping the railing so tightly the metal bent. His crew did not speak. They too saw what he saw, and none of them wished to break the silence. A graveyard stretched before them. Dozens of ships from his fleet floated in broken pieces, torn apart by weapons fire. The twisted remains spun. Slowly in the cold light of the nearby star, the commander's kind had fought countless wars across many systems. They had conquered worlds, enslaved species, and crushed resistance with overwhelming power. They were hunters, feared across the galaxy. Yet, as the commander's eyes locked onto one single surviving vessel, a human vessel, something inside him whispered a truth he did not want to hear. They were the prey. The human ship was smaller than theirs, scarred and scorched but still alive. Its hull glowed faintly, its engines flickered with damaged but stubborn light. Where his people would have abandoned a crippled craft, humans refused to let it die. Even in ruin, the ship pulsed like a living thing, defying destruction. The commander remembered the first time he had seen them in battle. He had expected weakness. Instead, he had seen something that turned his blood cold. That memory rose up in him now, sharp and cruel. It began weeks earlier, when the fleet first encountered the human outpost. The aliens had come with numbers, 20. Warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel, their weapons charged and ready. The humans had only 3 ships, smaller and older by design. It should have been over in minutes. The commander himself had believed it would be a simple show of force, a message to these new creatures who dared to settle in territory claimed by his kind. His fleet moved in formation, precise and powerful. Orders were shouted, weapons were locked. The humans did not retreat. That was the first surprise. The humans' ships moved clumsily, almost carelessly, as though they had no plan. The alien crew laughed in their stations, mocking the awkward maneuvers. The commander did not laugh. Something about the way the human ships drifted made him uneasy, though he could not yet explain why. Then the first shots were fired. The aliens. Cannons struck with brutal precision, tearing into the human shields. Energy flared across the void, painting the darkness in flashes of red and gold. One human ship spun out of formation, fire trailing from its engines. The crew cheered at the sight, believing victory already theirs. But then something happened that none of them had expected. The damaged human ship turned. Instead of retreating, instead of fleeing into the dark, it hurled itself forward, straight, toward the heart of the alien formation. The commander shouted orders, his voice rising in sudden alarm. His ships scattered, but too late. The human vessel slammed through their line, firing wildly as it burned. The impact tore one alien ship apart completely. Another spun out of control. The humans had sacrificed their ship, not to survive, but to kill. The commander had never seen such madness. His people fought to preserve themselves, to hold ground, to claim victory. The humans seemed to fight for something deeper, something darker. They fought to hurt, to destroy, to drag the enemy down, even if it meant their own end. The crew on the bridge fell into silence, their earlier laughter gone. They watched as the 2 remaining human ships advanced, even as the debris of their ally scattered behind them. The humans did not falter. They moved forward with a cold, deliberate rage. The battle stretched on. Alien weapons were stronger, shields more advanced, but the humans would not stop. Each time they were struck, they adapted. Each time they lost ground, they struck harder. They used tactics the commander had never witnessed, small, brutal tricks that turned space into a trap. One ship feigned a malfunction, luring alien fighters close before detonating a minefield hidden in its shadow. Another shut down its heat signature, vanishing into the wreckage before reappearing at point-blank range. unleashing fire that shattered two alien ships before they could respond. Every move was reckless, yet every move worked. The commander's stomach tightened as he realized the truth. The humans did not fight like soldiers. They fought like predators cornered, like creatures with nothing left to lose. Their survival was not their goal. Their goal was to take as many enemies as possible. With them, for the first time in his long career, the commander felt fear. He remembered one human most of all. The alien fleet had managed to cripple one of the human ships, forcing it to dock at the outpost station. The commander ordered a boarding team, confident they would sweep aside any resistance. His warriors stormed the corridors, weapons blazing. The humans inside fought back, room by room, until the floors ran red. When the commander reviewed the helmet feeds later, one image burned itself into his memory. A human soldier stood alone in a narrow corridor, his body broken. His armor was shattered. One arm hung useless at his side. He should have fallen long before, but he stood. He raised his weapon in his remaining hand and fired until the magazine was empty. When the weapon was spent, he drew a blade and charged. His body moved like a dying machine, but his eyes, those human eyes, were alive with fury. He cut down 3 of the commander's best before the others finally dragged him down. The commander could not forget that man's face, not because of his strength, but because even in the moment of death, he did not look afraid. He looked hungry. The alien soldiers returned from the boarding shaken, their victory hollow. They whispered among themselves, speaking words the commander did not want to hear. Words like madness and demons. His species had always believed themselves the apex hunters of the galaxy. Yet on that day, his soldiers began to doubt. The commander now stood again at the viewport, staring at the crippled but living human ship before him. The graveyard of his own fleet lay around it, a silent testimony to their failure. He could not understand how these humans, so young and so unrefined, could fight with such strength. He only knew one thing with certainty. They were not fighting to survive. They were fighting to win, no matter the cost. And that was why they could never be defeated. The commander felt the weight of this truth pressing on him, crushing him. His kind had built empires across the stars, enslaved countless worlds, broken every species that stood against them. But this new enemy was different. The humans were not like the others. The humans did not break. The humans did not run. The humans did not surrender, and as the commander stood there, his heart cold and heavy, he finally admitted the thought that had been growing in his mind since the first shot was fired. When he saw humans in battle, he knew they had never stood a chance. Nay, battlefield burned, but the man did not fall. The alien commander could not look away. Through the blurred feed of his soldiers' helmets, he saw it. One human, broken and torn, standing where no creature should still stand. Flames licked across the corridor walls, smoke thickened the air, and yet the human did not collapse. His armor was split open, one arm useless, blood pouring from a dozen wounds. Any warrior of the commander's kind would have surrendered to death long ago, but this human refused. He dragged himself forward, dragging a heavy weapon with his good arm, eyes locked with a fury that no wound could dim. The commander's chest tightened. It was madness, it was impossible, and yet it was happening right in front of him. He had seen bravery before, he had seen warriors fight with discipline and skill, but this was something different. This was not bravery, this was fire, a fire that would not die. The boarding mission had been meant to be routine. After the skirmish in space, one human ship was crippled and docked at its outpost station. The commander had sent his best warriors to finish the task. They entered, with confidence, storming the corridors with rifles blazing. Resistance was expected, but brief. The humans had already suffered heavy losses. The aliens believed the survivors would surrender or die quickly. That belief lasted only minutes. Inside the narrow metal halls, the humans did not retreat. They fought like cornered beasts, every step contested, every doorway a trap. The aliens had numbers, weapons, and armor. The humans had desperation and something deeper. They threw themselves into the fight as if death had no meaning. The commander's soldiers pushed forward, cutting through one group of defenders, only to be met by another. Grenades thundered, smoke filled the passages. The humans screamed as they fought, not in fear, but in defiance. One alien sergeant reported that even when a human was shot down, he would crawl, dragging a blade or reaching for a fallen weapon to strike one more time before dying. And then came the commander. Could never forget. He was tall for his kind, broad-shouldered, his face hidden behind a cracked visor. The feed showed him limping, dragging himself into a corridor where 5 of the commander's best waited. His body should have failed him. He had lost too much blood. His armor was broken. His movements were slow, like a dying animal. Yet when the aliens advanced, he raised his weapon and fired with deadly aim. One alien fell instantly, the shot tearing through his helmet. The human did not stop. Even when energy bolts slammed into him, burning holes into his armor, he stayed on his feet. He staggered, but he did not fall. His shots forced the aliens back step by step. Then, when his weapon clicked empty, he dropped it and pulled a blade from his belt. The commander heard his soldiers shouting in panic. They tried to surround the human, but he came at them like a storm. He swung the blade with his one working arm, cutting deep into the nearest alien's throat. Sparks flew as the human ripped a weapon from another's grip, using it as if he had trained with it all his life. He was hit again and again, yet every strike he made was filled with unstoppable rage. 3 of the commander's warriors fell before they finally brought him down. Even as he collapsed, he reached for the nearest alien, trying to drag him into death with him. When the man finally lay still, the corridor was painted with blood, both alien and human. The helmet feeds cut out. The silence on the bridge was absolute. The commander's crew did not cheer this victory. No one smiled. Instead, they shifted uncomfortably in their stations, their eyes averted. The commander knew why. His people had always believed that fear belonged to others. They had ruled through terror. But now, for the first time, his soldiers had seen something they could not understand. The humans were not afraid of pain. They were not afraid of death. The commander's second-in-command approached, her voice low. "They do not fight like us. They do not stop." The commander said nothing. His mind replayed the sight of that human over and over. It was not strength that unsettled him. It was not even the ferocity of the attack. It was the eyes. Behind the cracked visor, through the smoke and the flames, the human's eyes had burned with something more terrible than rage. It was hunger, a hunger to fight until the very last breath. Reports came from other corridors. Similar stories. Humans refusing to surrender even when cut off and alone. A medic who strapped explosives to his chest and charged a squad rather than be taken. A wounded pilot who crawled into the hangar, stealing an alien fighter and ramming it into a dropship. A group of engineers who locked themselves in a reactor room, overloading the core to deny the aliens control. Each story struck the commander deeper. These humans were not simply soldiers defending ground. They were willing to sacrifice everything, not for themselves, but to take the enemy with them. It was not war, as the commander understood it. It was something far older, something primal. When the boarding was complete, the aliens had taken the station. The humans were dead, but the cost was higher than any commander could accept. More than a third of the boarding force was gone. Many of the survivors carried wounds, and all of them carried something worse: silence. They did not boast of victory. They did not raise their voices in pride. They sat alone in the barracks, weapons untouched, eyes empty. The commander passed among them and felt the weight of what he saw. His warriors were shaken, some trembled, some muttered under their breath about curses, about demons. He could feel it spreading. The humans had left behind more than destruction. They had left behind fear. Later, when the commander stood alone in his quarters, he played the feeds again. He told himself it was for study, for strategy. But in truth, he could not let it go. He needed to understand. He watched the dying human again, frame by frame, every step, every strike. He should have seen despair. He should have seen pain. But what he saw was something else entirely. The human had not fought to live. He had fought to kill. He had fought to deny the enemy even the smallest victory. The commander paused the feed at the final moment when the human fell at last. Even in death, the man's face was twisted not in defeat but in defiance. His eyes glared up at the camera as if he were still alive, still daring the enemy to return. The commander closed his eyes. A whisper filled his thoughts, a truth he did not want to admit but could no longer deny. These humans did not burn out, they burned forever. The fleet regrouped, but the commander felt the change. His soldiers no longer laughed when humans were mentioned. They no longer spoke with certainty of victory. Fear clung to them, unspoken but strong, and deep inside the commander felt it too. The humans were not unkillable. He had seen them die, but they died in a way that broke the living. They died in a way that planted terror in the hearts of their enemies. They died in a way that spread like a fire that would not die. The commander knew this was only the beginning. The war would not end quickly, and if every battle was like this, then his people were not facing an enemy. They were facing extinction. He looked once more at the silent stars beyond the viewport. Somewhere out there, more humans waited, more fires burning in the dark, and he knew with a weight that pressed on his chest that when those fires came for them, nothing in the galaxy would put them out. The trap closed before anyone knew it. Was there? One moment the alien fleet was in control, ships moving in perfect formation, weapons covering every angle. The next moment, chaos exploded across the void. Alarms screamed, officers shouted, and ships spun out of position. The commander gripped the railing so hard his claws tore into the metal. His eyes widened as he realized the truth too late. The humans had planned this. They had been losing, or at least it had looked that way. Their smaller ships had been scattering, retreating in different directions, as if fleeing the battle. The alien crew had cheered at the sight, certain the humans were finally broken. But then the human ships had turned, every one of them, at the same time. They came together in perfect unison, firing in a coordinated strike that ripped through. The alien formation like teeth tearing into flesh. The commander's stomach turned cold. This was not chaos. This was strategy, and it was a strategy his people had never seen before. From the beginning, the commander's kind had dismissed humans as crude. Their ships were older, their weapons less advanced, their fleets smaller. In every measure of technology, the aliens were superior. But technology did not matter if the enemy understood the battlefield in ways you could not see. The humans fought with tricks. Not the kind born of desperation, but the kind born of careful, patient thought. They lured ships away from formation. They hid in wreckage, using the debris of war as cover. They jammed communications in short bursts, forcing alien captains to hesitate, then struck the weakest points before orders could be restored. It was like fighting shadows. Every time the commander thought he had them cornered, the humans turned the trap on him. One memory burned sharper than the rest. The aliens had surrounded a small human fleet near the orbit of a barren moon. Victory was certain. The commander had ordered his ships to tighten the noose, cutting off every path of escape. He had expected panic. Instead, the humans had gone silent. Their ships floated still, as if waiting. The alien crews laughed. Some even slowed their weapons, savoring the moment. That was when the humans struck. Hidden mines detonated across the moon's surface, tearing through the closest alien ships. From the craters below, small human fighters erupted, long buried beneath the soil, waiting for the signal. The stillness of the human fleet had not been surrender. It had been bait. Within seconds, the perfect trap of the aliens became their own cage. Ships collided in panic. Communication lines jammed. The humans fired relentlessly, every shot precise. Every strike meant to cause confusion. The commander gave orders as fast as he could, but it was like trying to control a storm with his hands. He realized then that humans did not only fight with strength, they fought with patience, they fought with minds as sharp as blades. After the battle, the commander studied the wreckage in silence. His crew waited for him to speak, but no words came. He had underestimated them again, and the price was carved into the debris of his ships drifting across the void. He replayed the battle dozens of times, searching for the moment the humans had revealed their plan. There was none. Their chaos had been an illusion. Beneath the noise, their moves had been exact, timed to perfection. He thought of his own soldiers. They were disciplined, yes. They followed orders without hesitation, but they did not think like this. They did not use trickery, not on this scale. They had always believed power and numbers would decide the outcome. The humans had proven them wrong. Another memory struck him, one he could not forget. A single human frigate, small and weak compared to the alien destroyers, had pretended to break down. Its engines flickered, its weapons fell silent. The commander had ordered his ships to surround it, eager for the easy kill. But as they closed in, the human frigate suddenly lit up, not with weapons, but with signals. The broken ship had been broadcasting false coordinates, scrambling the alien fleet's navigation. For a full minute, every ship in the commander's force believed they were in a different position than reality. In the void of space, a minute was death. The humans used that moment to strike. Hidden cruisers emerged from the shadow of a gas, giant, firing into the blind spots of the alien fleet. By the time the commander restored order, 4 of his best ships were gone. The broken frigate self-destructed, taking another with it. The commander could still hear the screams of the crew from that day. His soldiers began to whisper about human cunning. They used words like tricksters, deceivers, predators in disguise. The commander did not silence them, because he had seen the truth himself. The humans did not fight fair. They fought smart, and that was more dangerous than any weapon. The war dragged on, each battle more costly than the last. The aliens still had numbers, still had technology, but it was never enough. Humans always found a way to twist the battlefield, to strike where no one expected. They used the wreckage of destroyed ships as shields, hiding within the twisted remains to ambush patrols. They faked distress signals, luring rescuers into ambushes. They poisoned supply lines, filling captured containers with explosives that detonated inside alien hangars. Every victory the commander claimed came at a cost that felt like defeat. And every defeat tore more than ships from his fleet. It tore confidence from his soldiers' hearts. The commander's second-in-command asked him once, her voice low and uncertain, "How do we fight them?" He had no answer. Because to fight the humans was to fight smoke and shadow. To fight them was to bleed from wounds you never saw coming. To fight them was to learn, too late, that the prey had teeth sharper than the hunters. The commander returned to the viewport, staring at the stars, replaying every memory. He thought of the burning soldier who refused to fall. He thought of the traps, the ambushes, the hidden plans. He thought of the way the humans fought, as if they could see 10 moves ahead, while his own fleet stumbled blind. And he felt the same cold whisper again. The same truth that had haunted him since the first battle. They had never been weaker. They had never been foolish. They had never been prey. They had been waiting, and the commander knew with a hollow certainty that this war was not theirs to win. The sky lit up as the human ship tore itself apart. The alien commander stared in disbelief as the massive explosion ripped through space, the fireball swallowing 3 of his cruisers and scattering the rest. He had never seen anything like it. No captain of his people would ever destroy his own ship on purpose, but the humans had done it without hesitation. They had sacrificed one of their strongest vessels just to break the noose of his fleet, and it worked. Through the cloud of burning debris, the other human ships surged forward, guns blazing, shields flaring. What should have been a flawless victory for the aliens collapsed into chaos in seconds. His perfect encirclement shattered, his lines broken, his soldiers panicking over comms. The commander gripped the railing so hard his claws cracked the steel. His chest tightened as a terrible thought entered his mind. If this was how humans fought when losing, what would they do when winning? The trap had been simple. His fleet outnumbered the humans 3-1. He had drawn them into a corner of space near a dead star, cutting off every exit, surrounding them from all sides. There was no way out, no path to run. By all logic, the humans should have surrendered or died quickly, but humans never followed logic. At first, they resisted like cornered animals. Their ships darted in and out, inflicting damage but suffering heavier losses. The commander allowed himself to believe it was ending. His soldiers began to cheer, their voices loud over comms, victory certain. Then came the blast. The largest human ship, already burning from repeated strikes, suddenly turned into the heart of the alien formation. It ignored the fire raining down on it. It ignored the tearing of its hull. It drove forward with terrifying speed, as if guided by rage itself. The commander shouted for his fleet to scatter, but there was no time. The human ship overloaded its core. The explosion was a second sun, blinding sensors, ripping ships apart with its fury. And through the fire came the humans. The alien fleet faltered. Discipline collapsed. In the confusion, orders were lost, formations shattered, ships turned the wrong way, colliding into one another. Some captains froze, unable to comprehend the madness of what they had just seen. But the humans did not hesitate. They struck with perfect timing, as if the sacrifice had been planned from the beginning. Their smaller ships sliced through the wreckage, using the burning debris as cover. Alien targeting systems struggled to lock on, their vision blinded by the wreckage of their own fallen comrades. One by one, the humans picked them apart. The commander's second-in-command shouted for him to order a retreat. He ignored her. Retreat was dishonor. Retreat was death. But even as he shouted for his fleet to hold position, he knew the truth. The humans had turned the battlefield upside down. The hunters were running. His ships tried to regroup. They formed clusters, defensive circles, desperate to resist. But humans tore into them, targeting weak points with brutal precision. The commander watched as a squadron of fighters attempted to defend a cruiser. The humans let them chase one lone ship, then pulled them straight into the gravity well of the dead star. The alien fighters screamed as they lost control, pulled into the crushing abyss, their final cries cut short. The lone human ship darted away, untouched. Every move was deliberate, every strike carried purpose. This was not luck, this was not desperation, this was strategy. As the battle dragged on, the commander felt something strange building inside him, not just fear, something heavier, something colder. He realized he was watching a truth unfold that would change everything. Humans did not see death as defeat. They saw it as a weapon. Where his people feared loss, humans wielded it. Where his people clung to survival, humans threw it aside if it meant victory. Their strength was not in their weapons or ships, but in their will, and that will was unstoppable. Hours later, the battlefield fell silent. The commander's fleet was in ruins. Of the 30 ships he had commanded at the start, fewer than half survived. Most of those survivors were crippled, drifting without power, waiting to be claimed by scavengers or the void itself. The humans had taken losses too, but they were still there. They were still moving, and even their damaged ships pressed forward, hunting, never resting. The commander sat in silence, his crew waiting for him to speak. No one dared meet his eyes. They all knew the truth. They had been beaten not by numbers, not by firepower, but by something far worse. They had been beaten by will. Later, in the quiet of his quarters, the commander played the battle recordings again. He forced himself to watch the human ship's sacrifice, itself, frame by frame. He studied the explosion, the debris, the chaos that followed. He tried to find logic in it, reason. There was none. The humans had known they were outnumbered. They had known the only way to break the trap was to do something unthinkable. And so, without hesitation, they had given up their greatest ship to open the path. The commander felt his stomach twist. His kind would never do such a thing. They valued life too much, valued ships too much, valued pride too much. But humans valued something else entirely. They valued victory above all. The commander's thoughts drifted back to a question his second-in-command had asked him during the battle. How do we fight them? At the time, he had no answer. Now, after replaying the recordings again and again, he realized the truth. There was no answer, because to fight humans was not to fight soldiers. It was to fight fire itself. You could not scare it. You could not contain it. You could only watch as it spread, burning everything in its path, consuming all who stood against it. The commander returned to the bridge, his eyes hollow. His soldiers looked to him, waiting for orders, waiting for comfort. He gave them neither. He only stared at the distant human fleet as it vanished into the void, leaving ruins behind them. He whispered words that chilled his crew, words none of them had ever expected to hear from him. This war is already lost. No one spoke, no one argued, because deep inside they all knew he was right. The humans had shown them the turning point, and from this moment on, there would be no going back. The galaxy belonged to the fire that would not die. The galaxy belonged to humanity. The battlefield was silent, but the silence was not victory. The alien commander stepped onto the ruined ground of a once thriving colony world. Smoke rose in thick black columns, the air heavy with the stench of burned metal and blood. His boots crunched against the wreckage of machines and the shattered remains of buildings. Around him, the bodies of his own kind lay scattered, twisted in death, and mixed among them were the bodies of humans. Yet something about the human dead unsettled him more than the sight of his fallen warriors. They did not look defeated. Their faces, even in death, were locked in expressions of defiance. Their hands still clutched weapons. Their bodies pointed toward the enemy, as though even in the final moment they had refused to retreat. The commander shivered. His soldiers had won this battle, but as he looked across the field, he could not feel triumph. He felt only dread, because the humans had shown him the cost of defiance. And it was a cost his people could not bear. The assault on the colony had been meant as punishment. After the destruction of the fleet at the Dead Star, the commander needed to show strength, to remind his people and himself that victory was still possible. He chose the human colony as a target. It was smaller, lightly defended, and held no fleet. A strike here should have been simple. But there was nothing simple about humans. From the moment his fleet entered orbit, resistance rose. The human defense guns fired until they melted, tearing into the first wave of landing craft. Civilians carried rifles, fighting alongside soldiers in the streets. Workers turned construction vehicles into barricades. Children ran messages through alleys under fire. The entire colony became a battlefield, every building a fortress, every street a trap. The commander threw soldiers into the fight, wave after wave. The humans should have broken. Instead, they bled and fought harder. He remembered one moment with cruel clarity. His warriors had cornered a group of human defenders in a half-destroyed factory. The roof was torn open, flames spilling smoke into the night sky. Inside, a dozen humans crouched behind machines, their weapons nearly empty. His soldiers advanced, confident the fight was over. Then the humans charged. They came screaming through the fire, bayonets fixed, swinging pipes and hammers, throwing themselves into the alien ranks with reckless fury. One man leapt onto the back of a towering alien soldier, stabbing again and again, even as claws ripped into him. A woman with burns across her body dragged an alien to the ground and strangled him with her bare hands. When it was over, both sides lay in heaps. The humans had been annihilated, but so had half of the alien squad. The commander had watched the footage in silence. His hands trembled, though he would never admit it aloud. These were not soldiers defending a nation. These were people defending their very right to exist. And there was nothing more dangerous than that. As the days dragged on, the cost rose higher. For every street the aliens captured, they left behind bodies of their best. For every human who fell, another appeared in his place. One night the aliens pushed into the heart of the colony. They expected little resistance. Instead, they walked into a trap. Humans detonated charges hidden beneath the rubble, collapsing entire streets on top of the invaders. Hundreds of alien soldiers died in the crushing stone and fire. The survivors pulled themselves from the ruins only to find humans waiting. Bloody, battered, but alive, they attacked with the fury of demons. The battle became slaughter, not of humans, but of aliens. The commander ordered airstrikes to break the humans' hold, but even then, survivors clawed from the wreckage and fought with whatever they could find. At last, the aliens took the colony. The humans were dead or scattered. The flag of the commander's people flew above the ruins. Yet when he walked the battlefield, he felt none of the pride of conquest. His soldiers were broken. Their faces were pale, their eyes hollow. They had taken the colony, yes, but the cost was beyond reason. Thousands of his kind lay dead, littering the streets beside the humans they had killed, and worse than the numbers was the memory. His soldiers whispered about the defenders they had faced. They spoke of men and women who charged into fire, who fought with bare hands when their weapons failed, who refused to retreat even when surrounded. They spoke of human eyes, eyes that glared with fury even as death closed in. The whispers spread through the ranks like poison. The commander heard one phrase again and again: they do not fear death. That night, the commander sat alone in the colony's ruined command center. He stared at the maps of the galaxy, lines drawn in red for conquered space, blue for contested systems. The red should have comforted him. His people still held the advantage in numbers and territory, but all he saw was blue, because every blue mark was a wound. Every battle they won cost them more than they could afford, and every battle the humans lost seemed to make them stronger. The commander closed his eyes. He remembered the dead soldier from the boarding action, the fire that would not die, the trap that shattered his fleet. And now this colony, a victory that felt like defeat. He finally understood the truth. Humans did not care about cost. They paid it gladly, so long as the enemy bled with them. And in a war like this, there was no victory for his people. Only exhaustion, only fear, only the slow bleed of morale until nothing was left. As dawn broke over the ruined colony, the commander stood once more among the dead. He looked at the human bodies, at their faces frozen in defiance, and he felt a chill deep inside his bones. He realized then that his people had made a terrible mistake. They had thought humans fragile, but it was not the humans who were breaking. It was them. The humans should have been finished. The alien commander stood on the bridge of his warship, staring at the screen. It showed a human fleet boxed in near the orbit of a shattered moon. Their numbers were small, Their ships battered, their fuel nearly gone. By every law of war, they were trapped prey. But deep inside, the commander already knew the truth. Humans never accepted defeat. And when humans refused to die, they became something worse than an enemy. They became a nightmare that refused to end. The trap was perfect on paper. His fleet had encircled the humans with triple their number, heavy cruisers at the front, destroyers on the flanks, interceptors circling like hungry beasts. There was no path to escape. No reinforcements were coming. All the humans had to do was surrender, but the humans did not surrender. They moved into a defensive wedge, battered ships locking together into a single wall of steel and fire. Their weapons burned as if they still had endless reserves. Their shields flared with defiance, holding just long enough to strike back with brutal precision. The first wave of alien ships went in. They should have broken the humans easily. Instead, they broke against them. The commander leaned forward, eyes wide, as the humans fought like cornered predators. They did not scatter. They did not run. Every move they made was to kill, even when escape was impossible. A human frigate, already torn apart and leaking fire, rammed straight into one of his cruisers. The impact split both ships, scattering wreckage across the void. His soldiers screamed over the comms, their voices filled with shock, but the humans never hesitated. Another ship, badly damaged, turned all its guns on his fighters, destroying wave after wave, even as its hull collapsed. When the reactor finally blew, it took 20 alien fighters with it. His second-in-command gripped the edge of her console. "Commander, they are not fighting to live. They are fighting to kill." He said nothing, because she was right. Hours passed, and still the humans fought. Their ships burned, their weapons dimmed, yet they refused to stop. Every time the aliens thought the humans had nothing left, a new strike came. Torpedoes burst from hidden launchers. Small fighters appeared from wreckage, ambushing destroyers at point-blank range. The commander's forces should have crushed them quickly. Instead, his fleet was bleeding. Cruiser hulls split open. Fighters vanished in clouds of fire. Morale crumbled. And always, the humans struck with one truth. If they were going to die, they would drag their killers into death with them. The commander replayed footage of a single human ship, an old corvette, half its hull missing. It should have drifted powerless. Instead, its engines burned bright, driving it straight into the heart of his formation. It fired every weapon it had, then slammed into a destroyer, cutting it in half. The screen filled with fire as both ships vanished. He felt a chill in his chest. To his people, death was something to fear. To humans, death was a weapon, and in this battle, death itself seemed to fight on their side. The longer it went on, the more his fleet faltered. Orders were ignored. Captains broke formation, terrified of being rammed. Fighters circled without striking, afraid to get too close. Fear spread faster than fire, eating through discipline. The commander barked orders, demanding courage, demanding strength. But his words fell hollow. His soldiers had seen too much. They had seen men and women charge into fire. They had seen ships sacrifice themselves just to take one more enemy with them. And worse, they knew this was not the end. Even if every human ship here burned, the humans would rise again. They always did. The battle reached its climax when only a handful of human ships remained. One heavy cruiser stood at the center, its hull blackened, its shields gone. Around it, smaller ships circled like broken teeth. The commander ordered all ships to converge, to finish it once and for all. But the humans were waiting. As the aliens closed in, the humans triggered charges hidden in the wreckage. Explosions ripped through the void, tearing holes in the encirclement. Out of the smoke, the humans charged, not to escape but to strike one last time. The commander's screen shook as two of his cruisers were destroyed in seconds. Fighters screamed in panic. The human fleet, half dead and burning, roared forward. With a fury that defied reason, It was not a last stand. It was not surrender. It was war without end. When it was over, silence returned to the battlefield. The last human ship had fallen, its wreck drifting slowly into the dark. But the silence was not victory. The commander's fleet was torn apart. Dozens of ships gone, thousands of soldiers dead, discipline shattered. He had destroyed the human fleet, yes, but at a cost so heavy it felt like defeat. And in that silence his crew waited for him to speak. They wanted him to call it victory. They wanted him to believe it had meaning, but he could not, because the humans had shown him the truth. There was no last stand for humanity. Every last stand was only the beginning of another. Every defeat was fuel for the fire that would not die, and he finally understood what his people faced. This was not a war that could be won. This was a war that would never end. Later, in the quiet of his quarters, the commander replayed the final human transmissions. He listened as voices shouted to one another, not with fear, but with determination. Hold the line. Make them bleed. Take them with you. Even as their ships broke apart, even as death closed in, the humans had not begged for life. They had demanded only one thing, that their enemies suffer. The commander closed his eyes. He knew now why every battle felt heavier, why every victory was emptier. The humans had turned war into a weapon of spirit, and no fleet, no empire, no numbers could destroy that. He whispered to himself, the words heavy with dread. The last stand never ends. The war was already lost, but no one dared to admit it. The alien commander stood in the Great War Council, surrounded by leaders of his people, generals, admirals, and rulers who still clung to pride. Maps of the galaxy burned across the chamber walls, showing the Empire's red banners spreading across stars. On paper, they were winning, but in the commander's eyes, all he saw were scars, because behind every red banner was a cost too heavy. Behind every so-called victory was a field of broken ships, shattered soldiers, and whispers of humans who refused to die. The council spoke of numbers, of fleets, of strategies, but the commander could no longer hear them. His mind was filled with the memory of human eyes, cold, fierce, unbroken even in death. He had fought them, he had bled against them, and now he knew the truth. The galaxy was not fighting to conquer humans. The galaxy was fighting to survive them. He had seen it too many times, at the Dead Star, where humans destroyed their own ship to shatter a trap. On the colony world, where civilians fought like soldiers until the ground ran red. In the void of the shattered moon, where a human fleet turned its own destruction into a weapon that devoured everything around it. Each time, his people believed they had crushed the humans. Each time the humans rose again, fiercer than before. It was not victory. It was survival against a storm that grew stronger with every strike, and storms did not surrender. The commander stood before the council and spoke the words, none of them wanted to hear, this war cannot be won. Gasps filled the chamber, faces turned to him in outrage. Some shouted, calling him a coward, a traitor, but he did not flinch. He had seen too much. They do not fight for empire, he said. They do not fight for territory or resources. They fight because we threaten their right to exist. And when humans fight for existence, they become something we cannot overcome. He paused, his voice steady. We fight battles to win. They fight battles to endure, and endurance is stronger than victory. The leaders dismissed him with anger. They accused him of weakness, of spreading fear. They promised that with more ships, more soldiers, more weapons, the humans would finally break. The commander said nothing, but in his heart he knew they were lying, not to him, but to themselves. For the truth was simple. Every human loss made them harder. Every human death made them stronger. Every human stand, no matter how hopeless, echoed across the stars. His people were bleeding to death against an enemy that refused to stop bleeding back, and he could feel it now. The slow shift of power, the creeping terror that one day the galaxy would wake to find that the humans were no longer the hunted, but the hunters. The war dragged on. More battles were fought, more colonies burned, more fleets shattered, and yet the same story repeated. At a mining station, humans cut the power to their own systems, plunging the station into darkness. When the aliens entered, the humans struck from the shadows like ghosts, killing hundreds before vanishing into the dark again. On a frontier moon, human soldiers refused to retreat, even as fire consumed their base. They broadcast their last stand to the stars, their voices calm, defiant. Every alien soldier who heard it carried the memory like a curse. In orbit of a gas giant, a human ship, half destroyed, drifted into an alien carrier. The humans detonated, their own reactor taking the massive ship with them. The explosion lit the sky like a sun, visible from every moon in the system. Each time the aliens declared victory, and each time fear spread wider, because no victory against humans felt like triumph. It only felt like warning. The commander's people began to whisper in secret. Soldiers prayed before battle. Captains hesitated before charging human fleets. Civilians questioned why the war continued at all, and deep inside the commander's heart, the answer grew clearer. The galaxy had feared many things: disease, famine, invasion. But none of those fears were as great as this. The true fear was humanity itself, not their weapons, not their fleets, not even their numbers. It was their refusal to die. The breaking point came when the humans struck at the edge of the Empire itself. A small strike team, barely 100 men, infiltrated a heavily guarded weapons depot. They should have been slaughtered in minutes. Instead, they destroyed the depot, killed thousands of soldiers, and escaped into the stars. The commander received the report in silence. 100 humans had done what thousands of his people could not. And worse, the survivors spoke of the attack with awe, not horror. They told stories of human courage, of human fury, of human defiance. The humans had become legend, and legends could not be killed. That night, the commander stood alone on his ship's observation deck, staring out at the endless stars. His reflection in the glass looked hollow, broken. He whispered the words that had haunted him since the war began. We never stood a chance. The stars offered no answer, only silence, but in that silence he finally understood the truth. The galaxy feared humans, not because they were strong, but because they were endless. They turned every death into fuel. They turned every defeat into a lesson. They turned war into something eternal, and in the end, the galaxy would drown in that fire. The commander knew then that history would not remember his people, their ships, their victories, their empires. They would all turn to ash. History would remember humanity, not as conquerors, not as invaders, but as survivors who refused to be erased. Survivors who stood when all logic said they should fall. Survivors who made the galaxy tremble not with their power, but with their will. He lowered his head. His voice was barely a whisper, but the truth carried weight enough to shake stars. The galaxy belongs to them now, and with those words, the war was already over.